Hello, and welcome to WriteHive 2026 and to our panel, How to Choose an Editor. My name is Justine Manzano. I am a freelance editor, author, and the outreach coordinator here at WriteHive. And today I am joined by an experienced and very knowledgeable panel. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves to you. Let's start with Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Collins. I've been a full-time freelance editor since leaving academia in 2014, which seems like both forever ago and yesterday. I work in a lot of different genres, but I like to say I specialize in all things dark. I do a lot of horror, suspense thrillers, paranormal romance, sci-fi fantasy, mostly adult.
Hi, I'm Chyina Powell. Um, I, wow, 2014, that's a long time. I've been a freelance editor since about 2019. I'm founder of Powell Editorial. I work with a lot of genres. I work with creative nonfiction, but I love, love, love speculative fiction. I love fantasy, science fiction, cozy and weird stories. That's my home. I'm also the founder of the Women of Color Writers Circle, which is a nonprofit that offers opportunities for publishing, advice, resources for women of color. And our first anthology is, yes, this side of the screen.
I always have that problem too.
Hi, I am MultiMind. I write in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. My current works is uh, such as Dreamer, The Glass Man, and also Harlequin. But also, I have been recently featured in anthologies such as Under the Wings, anthology that will be coming out in 2027, as well as Ye Mulja Tears, which is an anthology about the water issue all globally, led by Epekudon.
We have some great wisdom to share with you guys today. And we're going to get started with what are the different types of editors that you may need? I'm going to start with China for this one.
Okay. Um, First, wow. Okay, so for me, I feel like different types of editors is tricky because most editors offer different types of edits and different services, right? So I guess I can start there. You have proofreaders, people who tend to proofread, and that's really all they do. That's what they specialize in. Line editing, content editing, developmental editing, which is something like I love developmental editing. I love it when authors come and they have ideas or they have like a few scenes, but they're not really sure how to connect one scene to another. Or I love being in that stage because I feel like I'm really a part, of the journey. But I offer other services as well. So sometimes you might find an editor who does not do that. They might only proofread, they might only line edit. Um, but that really depends on what you're looking for. And so those are typically the kind of edits you may need, and that might determine what kind of editor you are going to try and find.
For me, I only use one editor. I only use my proofreading editor. I am pretty old school with my editing because I create my story. The proofreader is the editor, which is also known as a copy editor, sometimes also as a line editor. Sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're different. It depends on the school of thought, I believe. But basically, I just need them to figure out the fact that I can't spell synonymous or parachute or pilot very well. That's their only job. They don't need to do much of anything else. Because for me, I feel like it's my work and I should be able to kind of understand my art. It's not a round robin. It's just, I can't spell cinnamon. That's your job.
I would just add that it's important to know that some of the different types of editing can be combined and some it doesn't make sense to combine. Like developmental editing that's aimed at feedback, helping you revise. So sometimes I'll get somebody requesting both a developmental edit and a copy edit at the same time, which doesn't make sense because copy editing, that's fine-tuning language, that's getting ready for publication, whereas developmental editing, you're expecting change. So some of these levels can be combined, but some can't.
Yeah, and also I feel like it's kind of a waste if you pay for a copy edit at the same time as a developmental edit because so much is going to change in a developmental edit. Going back over like a copy edit, you'll just need another copy edit. Like you're
Exactly.
making
Yeah,
There's
I
no point.
agree.
So how do you know which type of edit to purchase? I'm going to start with Multimind on this one.
For me, I do not consider editors or anything of that nature until the work is completely done. I have written the end. I've done my own personal hand edits. And because I write my stories out by scratch, so I type them up. That's technically the second draft. I already own an e-note, so that way I can do hand edits using a digital stylus. That for me is like the second one. It's that when the story is completely done, then I look at editor. Then I go and bother my editor. Because if the story's not done, there's no point in my mind for me to bother anybody that's not finished yet. Because as mentioned, you're going to have a lot of changes, and it's better to not lead somebody around Robin's barn for that.
I think when you're beginning as a writer, it's really hard to know when you need an editor. For first time writers, I always recommend they get a developmental edit if they can, because you don't know what you don't know. But I think after you've written a few books, you're gonna feel pretty solid about what type of editor you need. Like for me, when I'm writing, my editor sees it only after I've sent it to beta readers, and that's kind of it. And she just does copy editing, because that's all I need because I've done so much developmental focus on my end and then had beta readers. Um, I always recommend developmental edits if somebody's working on suspense or thrillers, or if they're writing the first in series, or if they're writing sci-fi fantasy, because one little thing with world building or one little clue in a suspense thriller or mystery not making sense, like one thing being off in the beginning can throw off so many different things. So I think with those genres and with the first book in a series, a developmental edit is really important, no matter what level you're at. Well, I shouldn't say that because some people just don't need them. I work with some authors who don't need a developmental edit right away. But I think most of the time a developmental is a really good idea in those genres. On the other hand, if you're writing romance and you read a lot of romance and you inhale romance and you know romance, there's a good chance you don't need a developmental editor.
So I agree with both MultiMind and Jennifer. I think that the type of edit you need really depends on your manuscript and sometimes you as a person. Like with MultiMind, she doesn't need, a developmental edit. They know that, they're so. I think it depends. So, if your manuscript isn't done and you don't know where to take it, you're going to need more than a proofread, right? But you're going to need maybe some developmental or content help. But if you, started writing, your voice, and you maybe like Jennifer have sent it off to betas or critique partners, and you just want to comb through because your mind is like, I'm sick of this story. I can't live in this world anymore. Um, I just need someone else to read it. I need new eyes. That's okay too. So it really depends on your writing style. Um, and hopefully, you can talk with an editor who's like, okay, if you only need a proofread, fine. Don't talk to me until you need that proofread. Or if you need help, you can have someone there to kind of help you along the way. So it really depends on your story and how you like to work.
And I wanted to piggyback a little off of what Jennifer said because I feel like it is really important to when it comes to like when you're new at writing thrillers or fantasy or sci-fi, it's very easy for like you to think that you're communicating your point right. And so either beta readers or developmental editors for that, just to sort of sense check that what you're saying is getting across properly, is so essential. So you've decided you need an editor, right? What's the best place to go out and find one?
I just got on Readsy in December and I've been really impressed with it. So I would absolutely recommend Readsy. If you're part of a writing community asking for recommendations when like among your writing friends, who they use, who they recommend, um, another great way to find editors is to look in the acknowledgement sections of the books that you really love. And a lot of writers call out their editors, or in some cases, they'll mention the editors. A lot of the self-publishing writers I work with, they mention the editors right up front, like in that front material where you see like the cover artist listed. But you can find the editors who work on authors' books who you really love, and that might be a way in. If you do that route, you just want to make sure that you know what type of editing you're asking for. Like you always have to find out what type of editing because you don't know just from seeing a name whether they did developmental editing or copy editing or what they did. But those would be the go-to places I would recommend.
I agree. I would like as soon as you asked that question, Justine, I'm like, Reedsy. Um, Reedsy and finding if you have a really good writers community or writing community near you or just, online, you can always ask. If you have friends that are published, you can ask what they thought about their editors. Like back when Twitter was like a thing, there was, the writers community there, but a lot of people have moved over to Book Sky and Blue Sky and, using that to like try and find writing community, things like that. There's also a couple of other, like I'm on Readsy, but I'm also a part of Editors of Color, People of Color in Publishing. I know people who have found their editors on Upwork, surprisingly enough. So um, I think that you do have to kind of spread your wings out a little bit and try and do as much as possible to find an editor that's right for you because like Jennifer said, if you love the book but all they did was proofread and you need some more content help and developmental help, they might not be the right editor for you, at least not where you are right now.
For me, I found my editor through Tumblr. Because I've already have a background in editing myself. I've done editing since I was essentially a teenager, from being my like school years book to reading other people's works and things of that nature. I was brought up a lot in a lot of the arts. So I had a lot of heavy teaching, so to speak, in literary style, including how to edit another person's work and things of that nature. So for me, I already know what I'm looking for, but I actually look for my editors kind of just, through Tumblr and through writing circles. And it took me a couple people before I found the editor I wanted. I already knew what type of editor I wanted. I already knew I wanted an editor of color. I already knew, that I have my own writing style and all they have to do is just simply, take care of the fact that I can't spell pilot. They don't need to do anything else. And also I wanted to work with somebody who was on the newer side because I would like it's kind of to give them a chance because I kind of have the mindset of no one knows how good you are at something until somebody gives you a shot. And that kind of is helpful because otherwise it becomes this weird feedback loop of have to get experience to get a job, have to have a job to get experience. And I really, really hate that loop. Um, so pretty much I kind of found mine through Tumblr because I just simply looked through her entire Tumblr and noticed like she's very good at writing. She seems to like a lot of the genres that I do, but also she's multilingual. My works tend to be in multilinguals. Well, my works tend to be in multiple languages, in different parts of it sometimes. So I need someone who's going to have a good broad perspective. But also I test the editors. I give them a small sample of my actual work and I don't try to, no gotchas, no tricks, no nothing and stuff, just whatever you come back with and stuff, because not only do I want to see how well you can correct the fact that am terrible at the word synonymous, but I also want to see if you try to edit things out that are not supposed to be edited out, such as if my character is Black, you're editing out them so they are becoming quote unquote raceless, meaning white as default. So that is for me in my works a major problem. So if I note that, and I usually ask, like, oh, are you just going to put it in the better part of it? That's fine. But when there's like, oh, it's not necessary to the story, it's like, aha, high unconscious bias. So it happened also, this has happened with editors of color as well, because I have not worked with anybody who wasn't BIPOC, and essentially. And so I do that not as necessarily as a gotcha there, but basically I don't want your unconscious bias to show up in more of my work because now that's more work and that means I need to get a new editor and that's gonna suck. But the one I work with is great. But when I work with anthologies, you have to work with the anthologies and editor and stuff. So it sometimes can be push and pull because that's a new person and you also have to figure out how not to scream at them at times. And you also have to learn how not to be like, I am an artiste and this is my art. It's a collaboration.
I feel like I had two thoughts coming off of what you said there. One is I've noticed this happen, the same thing that you said about having an editor of color and making sure they don't remove the race from your story, act like it's not important. I've seen that happen also in the LGBTQ community. And
Yeah,
they're
and I write both,
actually
like I write queer,
right.
like I write queer characters of color that aren't queer. Like I write the entire gambit. And the work that I actually do give is actually does have is a Black trans person. They're a Black trans character, and I don't mention the trans part, and it's because I'm going, I don't want to sit here and really curveball them, because if they can't handle one part, they're going to stumble on the other. And I don't want it to be like, oh, well, I'm good at writing, trans characters. That's great. And it's like, but you're terrible at writing Black characters or handling them. For me, it's like with me, you can't screw up anywhere. You have to be perfect, everybody. You have to be perfect in representation for queer representation. You have to be perfect in, BIPOC representation and stuff. Even if you flumble over your words and stuff, like I've been doing this entire time, it's one thing to be nervous, it's however another when you're kind of going, well, this is what the market is. And if the market is what you're imagining is some random white straight girl who is foaming at the mouth over heated rivalry, fourth wing, or whatever she's going to foam over next, that's not my objective of reader and stuff. I'm happy that they don't want to read my stuff, because I don't want them.
Gonna find what they want there.
Yeah, I don't want them. Let them be happy. I don't know. Good Omens just came out. They'll be distracted for a while. So that's kind of how I want it. It's not a case of, they must abide by my vision. Not necessarily. Your job is to make sure that I can spell cantaloupe correctly, but also to uphold the knowledge, because I have, for example, I don't need a white editor asking me, what is a satin wrap? What are braids? What are dreads? What's a sister lock? Because I can just go, oh, cool. I'll just hire a Black editor and they can go straight to the, yeah, you really suck at spelling cinnamon. Wow. Because that's all I need. I don't want it to be a learning experience of how to deal with people of different backgrounds for the editor. You need to already walk through the door knowing that knowledge. And I would much rather hire editors of color, because they are also the least likeliest to get hired. And for works like mine, since I'm not writing Project 2025, the fantasy edition, the sci-fi edition, or the horror edition, also known as just look at the news.
I was about to say the horror edition we're in.
It's like, I'd rather the person know their stuff, and I want them to focus on the work itself, and opposed to the other bits and cabibbles, which don't matter but do matter.
I'm also a sensitivity reader, but I noticed that a lot, even with my writing, because I also write and I do mostly short stories. But if I was submitting something to a contest and I sent it to a beta, and they were like, "Well, what's a TWA?" I'm like, "Is that some sort of food?" Or I'm like,
It's
"No,
a
I'm
music
talking
group.
about
It's a
hair,
music
and I
group.
mentioned TWA. You should know that it has something to do with hair."
Exactly.
Like
Yes, you can
you,
joke at them and say it's a
it,
music group and go, oh, wait, that's SVW, and then just really screw them over. But yes, they
it's
have to know
just
that.
it's And I think that's part of the thing. Like you want to be able to, of course, you want, a diverse opinion, but you don't want someone who has no idea where you're coming from, right? So you have to, that's also something to think about. Like, do you like go out on a limb, or do you, like you said, you want someone who already comes in the door knowing all of that stuff. And I think that's important too, because some people are like, I want someone who's very different from me because I want to read it from their perspective to see if like I can market my story to them, or I can market my book to them. But other people like me, I'm just like, I don't want to have to explain this to you. That's too much emotional labor for me. Um, and as an editor, I try not to put emotional labor on anybody, but like, or even including myself. So I'm just like, it's kind of a balance, but it can be really frustrating when you're the writer and you're just like, why don't you get this? Like you should have read a wide amount of stories by now to know certain things, or just live in the world. Like live in the world.
Or
And not
like
only that, but when they say different perspective, it's usually code for white. I have never
major
seen that
market.
be code for anything else. They
That's
mean,
true.
oh, I want somebody who's white, straight, cis. Would JD Vance read this?
Yes.
Would somebody from AFD read this? No, they wouldn't read my stuff, and I'm grateful. I'd rather go make it for the random kid who is used to not being seen and being grateful, and not only probably become a super fan. I mean, Ryan Coogler's not complaining.
I also think Google is your friend. Like it drives me wild that or and context clues too. Like the fact that the person you mentioned was reading something about hair and thought it was a food is wild to me. Um, it's like what happened there? The brain was not engaged.
It is wild because also for me, it shows how little the editor knows and cares about reading diversely. Like I will read books in Korean and Chinese and in like all sorts of different languages, including my own. If I reference James Baldwin, that should not scare you. And it's really, for me, that's why I also rather work with editors of color, personally for me, because they already know that, yes, they do know Edgar Allan Poe, but they also know Octavia Butler. They also know Kyung Kyung A. I need that. I don't need the person who only knows Neil Gaiman, uh, Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, the same five dead white guys. Because for me, and this isn't great, but I'm really harsh. And I will be happy to tell that person, you don't know literature, please leave. That's like telling me I know fine cuisine, I eat at McDonald's and Burger King. No, you don't. Please, I'd rather get the person who actually knows their stuff.
No, I just wanted to go back to China mentioned Upwork, and I wanted to mention the reason I actually only got on Readsy like I don't know, 6 months ago, is because for years I got a ton of work through Upwork and found work with publishers and a bunch of clients who I still work with through there. Um, Upwork has gone super downhill. And the trick with Upwork, if you want to use that system, is you as the writer need to do the research and look for the editors that you want and invite them to apply to your job. Because a lot of the editors who are on Upwork, they no longer browse jobs because the system is such a mess. But there are a lot of great editors still on there. You just have to look for them and do your research and actually invite them to apply to your post and not just trust that they'll happen to see it. Because the system is definitely not, it's not very friendly to freelancers right now, but they're still there. You just have to find them.
That's so true because um years ago when I first got on Upwork, I found a lot of the clients I still have today and they just go through my site now. But they found me on Upwork. And so I think that's a great place to kind of figure something like you said, you have to kind of rummage through and like figure out what you want. Already, hopefully, you know what you kind of edit you want and look at people's projects, look at their reviews, and sometimes you can schedule a call with, depending on the editor, you can just schedule a call to see, hey, how do I know if you're right, for me, if I'm right for you, those sorts of things.
What do you look for in an editor? And I feel like they sort of answered already, but I don't think you really had a chance yet, Jennifer. So, and feel
Yeah,
free to
for
add on.
me, I haven't had to look for a lot of editors because the work I've published has been traditionally published. So I don't hire an editor all that often, except for when I'm really struggling with something, and just trying to get it that final mile. Um, I can say that a lot of my clients, one of the reasons they hired me is because I'm a woman. I work with a lot of male horror writers who want to write really good women characters. They want to write diverse casts, and so they want specifically to not have a white male editor. And so I've had quite a few people hire me because of that. Um, it's definitely important to know if you want a specific lived experience. I have sensitivity. I don't know what I don't know where my sentence was going, but I can be a sensitivity reader for very specific things. So if you want an editor who has that background, like you can go out and find that person. So you're not going to have to, if you're hiring a developmental editor and you find someone who can do sensitivity reading for neurodivergence, for depression, for any number of things, then sometimes you can click a couple of those boxes at the same time by hiring the right editor. Um, and I think just, experience samples. Um, sometimes you want to hire somebody who's got industry experience. Sometimes you don't because you don't want that kind of shadow hanging over you. You just kind of have to know You either have to know who you are and what you want your book to be to find the right editor, or you have to have an idea of what you don't know so that you can go out and ask the right questions.
So how do you know in which editor is right for you? You've interviewed a few, you've given out samples. What would you say is like the way that you know this is your writer, this is your editor, like you have it? I'm going to start with China for this one.
Okay, so I think we touched on it a little bit. First, knowing kind of what you want. Also, clear pricing structure. If they're out of your budget, don't try to talk the editor, down. Because that has happened to me. I think my prices are pretty fair, but I was like, one guy wanted me to read his 200,000 word manuscript for like $25, and I'm just like, that's not gonna happen. Um,
Oh, that the freelance editor in me, my eyebrow twitched. Um,
so so don't look for editors outside of your budget and then expect them to fit in your budget. Already have a budget in mind. Um, And so, that's something to think about because if you want like someone who can do all the things and you like do even like formatting or whatever for you, they're not going to be okay with $25 for a project or even $25 an hour usually. Because that's so you have to be mindful of that. But also just like on the more like empathetic standpoint, your editor should be able to understand how you like to receive feedback, for one thing. They should not just say, you're going to take it how I give it to you. Because if you're not responsive to that and you don't change anything, what was the point of paying them to? So that's important. Also, someone who's responsive. You don't want someone who will say, oh, okay, I'll get to you when I get to you. And then 3 months later, they still have your work and you haven't heard from them, right? Um, like most freelance editors, myself included, will have like some sort of introductory meeting or free interview or sample edit or both, where we do a few pages. And so you can see, if you can kind of feel out how they work, how if they're, right for you in that standpoint, if they're a decent editor, because sometimes editors just they can't write well themselves, so they're not really sure how to edit your work, especially if they tend to read or edit genres that are outside of your own. So that sample edit does help. I also want to say, check their website, check the things they value, check what they read. Typically, you will be able to see some of that coming through on their websites if they have one. If you write romance and you've only written romance your entire life, but they like write murder mysteries and thrillers and read that sort of thing, they won't understand the tropes, right? They won't understand that a lot of romances do kind of have a little bit of info dumping in the first couple chapters, but that's normal because, you're starting off um, kind of you have to have that background to kind of understand where the character's going. And that may not be the case for a murder mystery. You might just be dumped on an island somewhere and, oh no, the captain got murdered. Like you don't need all that background, right? Um, Also, like if you go to their website and they are singing AI's praises from the rooftops and you despise it, they're probably not a good fit. And honestly, if anybody's singing AI's praises from the rooftops, they're not a good fit for anything. But
I second that.
so you also want to make sure they don't do that, right? Um, so kind of check to find someone who has like I have a manuscript wish list. I know a lot of other editors kind of have manuscript wish lists, like agents do. Check to see what they work with, check to see what they value, and if those things align, if you get that feedback back from your those first 5 pages or whatever you've sent over and you like it, then have a conversation. Um, I do that, and I think that I get more long-term relationships, like more than one book, from having that sort of open communication right from the beginning, having those introductory meetings. I have a client who I've worked with now. I worked with him on his very first book, and he's putting out his fourth book later this year. And I've been able to work with him on all four of those books, but that all started because some random guy gave him a business card like that he picked up in Cleveland somewhere, and he called and we had a have a short conversation. So don't be afraid to like talk to people. Don't be afraid to kind of feel your editor out, and don't just go with the first editor. Always look at a few editors because you're not sure what you need. You're not sure how they'll fit until you do that, right?
For me, I tend to pick new people when I get to pick the editor. When it's anthologies and things of that nature, you get the person, the editor who's managing the anthology. So you get them. But for me, so that means I'm picking people who don't have their websites, who don't have all their ducks in a row per se. Um, and at that point, keep it very formal and also ask them like, would you like for to be able to read this? So that means I'm working with people who also don't have long repertoires. I sometimes have seen editors where they have astronomical prices, but they don't have the portfolio to back it up. And stuff. It's like I get it that definitely times are hard, but also it is a skill, but it's a skill that is honed. And so that's why I also tend to go with also more like, college age folks who are still learning and could use that portfolio. But also, I'm still paying them. I am not paying them dribbles because that's still their time. But also, it's just that to pay also fairly so that way it's not murdering my pockets or things of that nature. Because they're kind of, building portfolio, they're making money, but also, I want to make sure it's a job well done. When it comes to finding the one that's right for me, I tend to go for, wow, they caught my mistakes. I didn't notice that mistake. Wow, that's very good. Even when they give it back to me, I'm very good at this. I can put in more mistakes and it's not my editor's fault, it's all mine. And they gave it back. It was perfect. And then they gave it back to me. And it's like, okay, nice and smeared. But it's definitely, I appreciate their eyeline. It also, I give them a second go where it's like, is this okay to publish in terms of like, you've seen it, you've read it. So if you're going, dear God, why? That's the time to stop me. But that's because I also have to have a lot of confidence in my own writing style, my own work, and things of that nature, which, by the way, the author, that might not be solved in a couple classes. Sometimes it's solved through therapy because the block could just simply be you. And it's very much that. It's not, okay, don't go into it thinking they know everything. I know nothing. You do not 100% know that. Even if they have every award on their desk, that just means they're very good at getting approval from the group that gave that award, not necessarily that they're the best there ever was, per se. But definitely, it's just try to just go for also what works well and what works best with them and with you. Make sure the repertoire matches what their paying scale is. If they're brand new, don't screw them over. Don't do the 25 for 200,000 pages. That's not okay. And stuff. Be fair and stuff. But definitely it's just that, and all the same, it's just also if they're using AI and AI is not reading your book, a human being is. So why make it for a machine that's not going to read it unless it wants to steal from you? Go for anybody who's actually using human work. If I had an editor that used AI, I'm not paying them because you can't even copyright. And you didn't do any work. You didn't work, so you're not getting paid and stuff. I want a human to read it because that's what I expect is going to be buying my work. But definitely, yeah. Just go for an editor that works also very well with you. They don't have to be your best friend. It's not what they're there for. They're there to make sure that your work is tight.
Yeah, and just before we move on, I just wanted to say I totally agree. No editor should be trying to change your work. They're there to help your work shine better, to catch those like sort of things. Maybe if you are writing a mystery and that all of a sudden this one character who was super important in the first half just disappears and we never see him again. They're there to catch those things, those mistakes or those kind of forgotten moments, but they're not there to change your work or make it their own or put their own stamp on it. So if an editor is trying to change your work, fire that editor. It's okay to fire editors. It's perfectly fine.
It is really, genre is really important. And I think, two notes on that. If you're hiring a developmental editor or if you need feedback of any kind, you need to make sure that the editor knows that genre and not just the genre, but the subgenre. Like fantasy, sci-fi, romance, those especially, the editor needs to know the subgenre you're working in and not just, romance in general. Um, and at the same time, if you don't know the genre of your work, you need to be upfront about that. Um, I recently got hired to edit a suspense novel. It sounded like a suspense novel, like it looked like a suspense novel from the beginning and from what I read. And I was about, I don't know, 50 pages into it before I realized, oh, this is not like, it's not just a slow burn. Like, this is not a suspense novel at all. And some, if you don't know what your genre is, you don't know. You're not always gonna realize you've kind of veered into a different area. But if you're not sure that you're in the genre lines, try to be honest with the editor so that hopefully you can find someone who has experience in any of the genres that you might have accidentally written. That's ideally so they can tell you, okay, this is what you say you've got, but this is what you've actually got. So, depending on your goals, these are your options. But especially if you're at that feedback stage in the earlier stages, the editor needs to know your genre. If you're just hiring a copy editor or a proofreader, it might not matter that much. It probably doesn't.
You just made me think of a time where I was hired to do a women's fiction edit. And I was like hysterical laughing. The person had great comedic timing. I was like, this is a rom-com. It's not a woman's fic. It's a romantic comedy. It was hilarious, but she was trying to like her whole query letter and everything was built towards women's fiction. And
Women's
I was like,
fiction.
hold the phone. We are
Back
not
up.
going in the right direction with this story. And was able to help and actually she ended up getting an agent when she rewrote everything to make it a romantic comedy. Because when you're working with genre, like the agent and the editors that pick you up as far as publishing is concerned, when you're going for traditional publishing, can be it can be a totally different group if depending on what genre you're looking for. So you definitely want to make sure you're like aiming at the right genre, and those early stage developmental edits can really help in that regard.
Oh, and
Um,
also I just thought of it. This is from when I'm not sure if it was I think it was high school and stuff, but I remember the story of F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm from Baltimore. He lives in Baltimore, so on and so forth. And stuff. Almost bought his apartment. Terrible taste in floors, that guy. But here's the thing is that I remember his works, The Great Gatsby and stuff. My teachers would joke that anybody can write like F. Scott Fitzgerald because all you need to do is get super drunk and give your manuscript to an editor 3 days before publication time and stuff. Basically, the story of that work, for example, The Great Gatsby, was that F. Scott Fitzgerald was pretty much emptying every liquor store there was in Baltimore. And that the editor got it like maybe a few days before it had to go to the publisher. And the editor, working morning, noon, and night, tightened it up within 3 days. And the stuff he couldn't tighten up, he simply told the publisher, this is a new writing style and stuff. He pitched it as this is a new writing style no one's ever seen. That's why it looks the way it does. And I don't have the dark circles under my eyes because I've been crying all night. And so that was always an editor story I think of. Sometimes the editor does save the work and stuff. And every time people go, oh, Great Gatsby is this great work. And I'm like, it's not because of S. Scott Fitzgerald, it's because his editor did not know how to say I quit. And he should have certainly done that.
it really is all about making the work shine to the best of its ability, right? So
He
that
did.
is
He absolutely did. Because also, I guess the editor said I quit afterwards because he fell. F. Scott Fitzgerald works fell off very quickly afterwards. But yeah, please don't drink and please don't make a manuscript drunkenly and give it to your editor to go, hey, it's here. Because that poor guy.
Can't imagine. Turning to the idea of traditional publication, do you need to hire an editor if you are traditionally published?
Um, if you're looking for an agent, is that what
If you're
we're
looking for an agent or if you've already been traditionally published, like what are your
yeah,
thoughts around traditional publishing and hiring an editor?
hiring an editor? I think that if you're at the stage where you're looking for an agent, it's okay to start off without one, but I think if you can afford to hire a developmental editor, especially if you're writing suspense, thriller, sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, any of those genres. I think it's a really good idea if you can. I'd also say that if you start querying and you're just not getting anywhere, then really think about hiring a developmental editor. I had a client years ago. She's agented, published traditionally now. She hired me to edit a YA fantasy. And she said, I've been querying it. I can't figure out what's wrong. I'm not getting any hits. The voice was all wrong. Like within 5 pages, we were on the phone talking about how like she had a YA fantasy story. The voice was totally wrong for YA. So she had to decide whether to age the story up to adult or essentially rewrite it. And I mean, there were some other things along the way that we fixed. It wasn't just voice. But I mean, within 5 pages, I was able to tell her like, this is the big problem. Like, this is why not a single agent is getting back to you. Um, I do have, I do work with some traditionally published authors as their editor. Um, and they get the big book deals. They do, they're on the list, et cetera, et cetera. One of them came to me because she was writing romance for the first time, and she'd always written suspense. And her agent actually found me for her to help her start implementing romance into suspense. So it was kind of like a book coaching slash developmental editing thing. So it might be that you want a developmental editor or a different editor because you're breaking genre lines, or you're doing a mishmash, or you're experimenting with something you haven't done and you need that outside experience. I work with the other author, um, who works with an agent. Her agent is very hands off in terms of editing. And he wants to be able to just get the book, read it, say this is good, and send it off to publishers. So she needs an editor before it gets to that stage. So she has me. I would say normally, if you're going the querying route and if you're looking for an agent, you don't necessarily have to start with an editor. You certainly don't need to hire a copy editor unless you're really, really, all over the place. Like, that your grammar is everywhere, your tenses are everywhere, your spelling is everywhere. You definitely don't need to hire a copy editor before you're querying it, unless you're in that very specific range where you need the help. But a developmental editor, if you can afford it, it's often a good idea just because querying is so competitive.
For me, I'm independently published, but whenever my works are being accepted for publication, just like it had been for Nightlight or for Your Tears or for Wings, for Under the Wings, those are traditionals and stuff. So that is the editor you don't get to pick. And you work with them the best that possible. Usually they are basically just proofread editors. They just want to make sure that same thing. Can you spell pilot and ampersand correctly and stuff, which is, different. It's just that if you do need an editor for your work, traditionally in the past, I was told, if you wanted to be traditionally published, you don't necessarily need an editor because they want your voice and stuff, not your voice plus some. And so that I usually would say stick with that if you choose to be traditionally published, because it is true. They want your voice and stuff, but go for a proofreader if you, as already aforementioned, if you are bad at spelling and things of that nature, as N.K. Jemisin says, like, oh dear God, what have you done to the language? And so on and so forth. That's fine. Definitely work with that. But also, tighten it up the best that you can. So it is indeed your voice as much as possible, because that's the thing. When you're traditionally published, you do get an editor. And so it's kind of as needs to kind of be you in the raw form, so to speak.
I agree. And I would just add that if you are, getting traditionally published, if you're seeking traditionally published and you're at that stage where you're either querying or you've already been published, you already have an agent, you might just want another pair of eyes. So instead of hiring an editor, maybe, talk to your beta readers, get a critique partner instead so that you can get that other pair of eyes on it so that it flows well, because that's the most important thing. Because you will get an editor. So as long as your story flows well and it makes sense, like your main character's name can't change, halfway through. for no reason, right? Like it can change, but like we have to have a reason. It just can't be random, like, or we can't wake up one day and your main character is an alien, and then next thing we know, somehow they're human, or like so those sorts of things. Just get a proofread or get a typically, I like to have a good like 3 or 4 people I send my work off to, and I can just email them like, "Hey, are you available? Hey, are you available?" And usually one of them answers like, "Can you, okay, read my trash. Let me know if it's okay."
I usually call that a vibe check. I actually, because I don't have beta readers, alpha readers, none of that, but I do have the same old, like, Ma, look at what I made type of vibe. So I just tell friends, like, this is a vibe check. This is just, I made a thing. I want to show somebody to get it out my system.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like I just want to make sure that this makes sense on paper, like it does on my head. And there you go. That's really all you need when you
I
traditionally
do the
publish.
same. I don't want my friends to sit here and go, wow. So it felt like we were in the recording booth with current day Nicki Minaj. What were you trying to say? Kind of like that skit, I forgot one where it was like drip, drop, drip. What am I saying? No, really, what am I saying?
Oh man, like I write a lot of comedy, so my sense check is always, are you laughing? Did these jokes land? Like, because your sense of humor is not everyone else's. So it's like, it's always good to hear. And no matter what edit I do, I usually throw things like that in. So even if I'm like copy editing a piece, if I see something funny, I'll like put my little LOL in there so that while they're getting the edit, they're still getting that little sense check of, oh, I did something funny, or if or reacting to something the character says, like, oh no, that's going to be bad, or something like that, so that
Yes.
people, even in that proofread, or even in that, like, you're still getting that little bit of a sense check, because I feel like we need that as writers. We need that little,
Hmm.
oh, they see where I'm going with this moment.
Yeah, I do that. I read a lot of thrillers too, and so like when I get thrillers in front of me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, no, no, no,
Yes,
why? And like just typing, like no, like tell them to turn around, like just
For me,
yes.
I just because I also recognize that, like, in a way that is still like a biased thing, because these are people that are your friends and so on and so forth and stuff. I do tell them, like, don't excoriate my feelings, but don't, spare my feelings too much. This is just a vibe check. Because also I'm like, this is before I send it off to editor and stuff, like expect things to change. But definitely, yeah. Usually, whenever I'm told to read stuff, I only thing I really care about and stuff is mainly just harmful tropes and stuff. And because I always look at it as, for all I know, your writing style is brilliant in some way, shape, or form. But because I'm not into it in some way, shape, or form, because I am my own reader with my own likes, dislikes, and blah blah blahs and stuff, that I don't want to sit here and down something that could be great. Somebody could be very good at making heavy settings, and I'm going, oh man, they're going into settings too much. I don't like that. That's because that's a me thing, not because their work is bad. And so on and so forth. So all I tend to look for is just super harmful tropes. And that's pretty much it. I just go, oh, it's great. Just next time, don't. Why is the lesbian dead? Unless there's like some really, really good wapow after it. But that's usually kind of how I look for, because everybody does have their own biases in a way, and I try to recognize that as much as I can.
In the publishing industry, there's scams galore. There's a lot of pretty dangerous, predatory people out there, as far as like just grabbing up all your money. So what are some red flags that you want to watch for when you are, and maybe even not in a predatory sense, but also red flags as in, how do you know your editor has experience? How do you know, like, that you're approaching someone who is an actual editor? Can you give any hints as far as what to look for there?
I mean, if you're on a site like Readsy, you know everybody has already been vetted. Like you know they had to. I know more people who've gotten turned down from being listed there than I do people who are on there. Like it's not easy to get on that site, which is one of the reasons it's so good, because you know the people on there they've been vetted. Um, I would say that the one of the red flags for me would be anybody who is just popping up in your DMs saying, hey, do you want an editor? Like, hey, are you a writer? Are you this? Whether it's on Discord, Facebook, I don't care where it is. Like if you've got somebody just showing up in your DMs, they might mean well. They might even just be a college student trying to get started. But you can just tell them like this is not the way to find clients. Like this is not the way. Um, I would probably not hire somebody who didn't have some reviews that I could look at unless it was clear that they were like brand new to a site. Like everybody is brand new to a site, whether it's Fiverr, Upwork, or Readsy at some point. Um, but if they're not brand new, if they don't have if they don't have a profile, if they don't have a website, if they don't have anybody they've worked with who I can talk to, um, I'm gonna have a hard time hiring them unless they were really upfront and just saying like, look, I'm just getting started. I'm trying to build a profile. I'm trying to build a client list. So I'm charging these like discounted, really low rates in order to get started. I mean, that's how I got started. I charged basement level rates just in order to get some experience and get a profile and get that beginning. If nothing else, you can ask for referrals. You can look up their name. Um, those would be the big things I would point to.
I want to also add AI anything is a major red flag in stuff for
Yes.
everybody involved, including you, the writer. Please don't disrespect other people's time. If you are using AI, you're not a writer, you're just a slop. But definitely same thing for editors. Anything AI, anything is stuff. Like I said earlier, AI robots are not going to be reading and looking at your work. It's human beings. So your work needs to be for human beings. If you are that unconfident in your writing to that degree, that's a therapy issue, I personally feel, because that's a confidence issue as it boils down to. But definitely anybody who goes, oh, AI this, AI that, because also the editor is feeding your work into an AI, which is a major issue currently for a lot of writers, just having it getting scraped. You don't want somebody who's just going to happily feed it through the wood chipper of thievery. So it's very much that they are pro AI. And also, why would they be pro something that's kind of built to replace them if it was actually done well? So that's definitely that. No AI anything. And also for me, especially because I'm a writer of color, I'm a Black writer and stuff. Any writer who says, "Oh, I'm all pro diversity," but it's about as diverse as a Klan meeting in the 50s. It's really bad if they can't show it and stuff, and if they are not of it, then pass up on them. Yeah, they mean well, but they are not going to do well. It's you're wasting your money. Burning it would be smarter. But yeah, but basically lack of diversity because also if they are very only know one very, very 1 minute experience, that means everything else is going to pass them like a spaceship, and that's not good.
Yeah.
You mean we can get answer those AI emails we all get in our inboxes?
I actually have replied to those, and they're usually as a human, and they always show the human side, and I usually get them nice and angry. It is almost hilarious.
It cracks me up every time. Hello, author. Are you looking for an editor for blank book? Um, sorry, don't,
Exactly.
it's
And
so
I just
bad.
sit here and I'm like, you must be in like why if I did, why would I want a nobody like you? And usually I get the human because also read Writers Beware.
Mhm.
Writersbeware.blog, I believe is their new address and stuff. I may not be the biggest fan of SFWA, but they're pretty good when it comes to Writers Beware. They will let you know what these scams do look like and also how AI is affecting it and making the scams a lot harder to spot sometimes.
Hmm.
Definitely go to writersbeware.blog. They do know their stuff. And on top of that, you can also ask them questions. They're really nice and they're really, really smart.
I think another red flag is any editor who's not willing to sign a contract. Um, And what I mean by that is like not all editors do that, but I have a contract. And in my contract, clearly states I don't use AI. I will not steal your work. I will not post your work anywhere. Like those sorts of things just to add a level of confidence in me. And I've met people who said, well, my editor refused to sign my NDA or something like that, or they didn't want to sign a contract saying that they wouldn't use my work or that they I'm like, well, why did you send them your work if they kind of just told you they were going to use it? Or and then it's like it's one thing to say, oh, this is in my portfolio, or to have like a little sample page or something like that. But it's another thing for someone to have your entire body of work somewhere on their site for free, right? Or somewhere like in their backlogs that they can access. And another thing, going back to like just pricing, unclear pricing structure. If there's not like prices listed or you talk to them and they seem kind of shady, like use your common sense. Like my mom always says, the Lord gave everybody, a measure of sense. Some people just choose not to use it. Use your common sense. Like if you can't get a clear price or you can't get a clear estimation of when they'll be done and your work is finished, you have the final word count and you just need someone to go through it, that's a red flag for me because how do you not know? How do you not know how much you're going to charge? How do you not know how fast you read or if you're of your like or what your availability is? Those are all things to be wary of.
I would also say that, like, so I know that not everybody charges. Personally, I don't charge industry standard prices. However, it's good to know the industry standard prices because so the Editorial Freelance Association, I think I'm remembering that right, EFA has that listed. And if someone is charging you double and triple that amount, stay far away. Like I understand, and if they're, I mean, personally, I discount my work a lot, mostly because I work with writehive, and so I'm trying to help people get their editing done for less. But it's if they're super far away from what industry guidelines dictate, then either they don't have a lot of experience, which is okay, just know what you're getting into, right? Or they are trying to make money off of you for like ridiculous amounts, and that's unsafe.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Because definitely, and also they have to, they do have to eat, but charge fairly as well. And, just that when you are working with an editor and stuff, because they also be very wary of editors who want you to, they are work for hire. They don't get access to copyright or anything. It is not their work, it's your work, and stuff to make sure to work with that. And, I'm a little iffy when it comes to NDAs, but also when it comes to dealing with editors and dealing with work, it's just that when you are dealing with an editor like NDAs, that could be a little iffy sometimes, only for me, only because I understand definitely NDAs. I came from the music industry. But also, if you are a no name nobody, usually it's like it's can be meant to be comforting, but also you don't have Coca-Cola's recipe. So sometimes, you know, temper expectations or what they are willing to sign on anything. Talk with them. That's a human being. If they're not a human being, again, that's a scam. But they're a human being. And also if there's something that you guys are not seeing eye to eye on, try to discuss it and hopefully it will work out. Because also this is a person you do have to interact with and things of that nature. And you don't want somebody who's like, oh, I'm tough as nails. Well, that's not always going to work for everybody else and stuff. And it's so that you guys can at least have a decent enough relationship, even if you go, oh, this person always marks up my work with a red pen. So at least have a decent enough relationship outside.
And red pens are good if you want the guidance. Like red pens can be good. I think
It
one of
can
the
be
things
not when it looks like they just dipped it in red ink and gave it back to you and
they
went, well,
just
did you at
they
least like
bled
the
on your
title?
page. I always say like my manuscript's bleeding. But in all seriousness, like I know personally from my experience, like I have ripped up people's work like as far as like red pen wise,
Oh,
but
thanks.
it's about delivery, right? Like it's
Hmm.
Yes.
you can.
Yes. You don't want them to not want to ever write again.
Yes, exactly. And you want to make sure that you're also in that same breath pointing out really good lines, giving them those boosts of
Exactly.
what you really do enjoy because everyone's writing what even when it needs to grow also has has great points. And so you want to go in there and be like, you're really great at this. You're really nailing this character. I love this relationship. Even if like there are things that like they need to tighten up and things like that, because it's all about how you talk to people so that they actually want to keep writing
Yeah.
too.
Exactly. I have met way too many people, I feel, who kind of have the I would have been a writer, but I took an arrow to the knee type story. And usually it's because somebody really like demolished their story. And instead of being it, they were like, oh, it was constructive criticism, and it was just more cold criticism than actual constructive, which isn't cool.
When I do like prospective client interviews or just have that conversation, like, how do you like to receive feedback? Because some people want that, okay, just tell me how it is. But other people are like, okay, I kind of need you to like there needs to be some sort of cushion, like, so you have to know how people like to receive feedback. So even if something is, dreadfully, like you're not really sure what you're writing, I'm not really sure what I'm reading. Like, how can we, do that? You need to be able to say, okay, well, I'm not really sure what genre we're in, but I really love this character. Like, this character is awesome. I could be best friends with this character. Like, or you are really great at writing like scenes. Like, your description is off the charts. Like, I can imagine it in my head. I can see it. I feel like I could go there tomorrow. So you have to be able to understand, okay, there's always something good about a work, but also you don't want to lie and say, oh, this work is perfect. So you have to have that sort of balance. You want to have like you want to be able to say, you okay, what genre are we in? But wow, your characterizations are amazing. So it's about balance.
And I think that's why samples can be so important because you learn how an editor communicates. You learn, you know, you see a sample and you know, okay, I'm comfortable with this. Like, I like the way they're talking to me. I like the way they're giving me support. And it's okay when you're looking for an editor to say, I'm a first-time writer and this is terrifying and I don't know what I'm doing and I really just need you to explain everything to me step by step. Just all communication, like I think to talk about red flags, like an editor who is very slow to answer questions or who's not communicating clearly, like those are red flags because communication has to be super clear from the beginning.
And ego. That's the one that we haven't touched on yet. You're gonna get your feelings hurt and stuff. It's okay. It's okay, honestly. Even if you're like, all right, it's okay to rage at the screen, just don't rage at the keyboard and stuff. It's okay to have your feelings hurt and go, this person, what do they know? What do they know? But you learn to put your ego to the side for a little bit, especially if they're not trying to be malicious or vicious or things of that nature. Because I also feel like some writers have very ironclad egos. They're like, tell me anything. But the second you do, it's kind of like the lion with a thorn in their paw. And nobody really wants to put up with that nonsense and stuff. Like, so that's why, if you need a day or two to take a break from looking at the work, please do so. But don't sit here and start to try to rip the editor's head off for essentially doing their job.
I learned very early in my writing career that I cannot answer an edit right away. I can't. I cry a little first, if it's a big edit. If it's like a heavy developmental, I have to go cry a little first. I need to go contend with my emotions about things like cutting whole characters, which sometimes is necessary for the flow of a story, or cutting storylines from like, D storylines or something like that from a work. One of the first things I have to do is like cope with the loss of that thing and not scream or imagine the possibility before I go, because my initial reaction is and will always be, what do you mean I have to cut that whole part? And almost confrontational. So I just have to like, okay, sit with this for a while. Do not talk to that person. Say thank you. Okay, I'll look it over. If you don't
Yeah.
start fighting with that editor.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
even though all I do is just get proofread stuff, I have to take sometimes a break where it's like, wow, I can't spell for crap. I'm gonna sit in my feelings. And that's okay. It's okay to rage at the screen, even if in the middle of you reading it, like, well, yeah, obviously they used the wrong there, because I'm just a genius. It's okay to do that. Just don't do it on the keyboard.
And from an editor's perspective, you have to be okay with, especially new writers, them coming at you like, this is my writing, this is perfect, la la la, because they're going to do that first, especially if they're new writers, they're going to do it at least once. And you have to be okay with that. I remember I was giving a sensitivity read, and I was just like, I told this person, I'm like, did you notice that the black characters only show up when they're serving someone, and the entire like the only Latina character you have, like her entire personality is that she likes to dance and has a huge family. Like, did you notice those things? And she's like, no, this like and so they're gonna come at you like at least once, especially if they're new writers. And you have, as an editor, have to be okay with knowing, okay, they've never had this sort of confrontation before, and not take it, personally, and not be like, okay, well, maybe I'm not you might be the perfect editor for them. They might just not have gotten control of their emotions to be able to see the bigger picture yet.
Yes, and also for sensitivity reading, I mean, because I used to do it, now I straight up don't because I got tired of that. But definitely, it's just that it's also to have that conversation in the beginning, like if they're used to editing, new to editing, so on and so forth. I already had my works edited and professionally and things of that nature since I was like a teenager and stuff. So I know what the editing process is, but also it's just that, and that's why I say, having somebody who doesn't have those type of biases, because for all I know, they'll be like, wow, they don't need this black character, or why is this acting this way? That not necessary, but other stuff, it's basically because it's a sensitive moment for the writer, and if they're not good at that, they are going to be unnecessarily combative. And if the editor doesn't know how to handle it, it can just make a good relationship go south for no real decent reason.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to wrap up with any last thoughts you have about the topic and to plug yourself and your stuff.
Hi, Jennifer again. You can find me on Readsy. If you search Jennifer Collins is a super common name, but chances are if you search my name alongside editor, you'll find me. I'm also the VP of the Howl Society, which I should have mentioned in my initial Discord. In my initial intro, so I do a ton of work on Discord with writers and horror. Um, Look me up if you want an editor. I do have a novel coming out, hopefully later this year, maybe next year. Um, that's horror. I've got some paranormal romance out, etc. But yeah, just look me up. I'm always happy to work with first-time writers, and we can have a conversation and see if I'd be a good fit.
Hi, I'm China. You can find me. I'm very easy to find. Like my name isn't common at all, at least the spelling. But also, you can find me at powelleditorial.org. You can find me on Readsy, Upwork. Like I mentioned, I love speculative fiction. That is my home. So if you write speculative fiction and you just want to, talk about it, I'm also like always on Discord. It's really a problem. I have some sort of Discord addiction that I'm trying to work on. It's not working. But you can find me there as well. Um, I have a few short stories coming out later this year. Um, but on this side of the screen, you can see Devotion in the Open Air, which is the Women of Color Writer Circle first anthology. Our second anthology is coming out later this year, and our third anthology will also be open to calls later this year. And I'll give you all a hint. Think steampunk. So if you're interested, feel free to DM me. My DMs are also always open because, again, I'm always on Discord.
Hi, I'm MultiMind, and also you can find me at multimindpublishing.com. All my books are available in ebook, print, and audiobooks. Anywhere and everywhere books are sold and or rented online and offline. On social media, I mostly am on Instagram and Threads as Multimind Publishing. I'm sometimes on Blue Sky, but not really, guys. But mainly that's where you can find me.
And I'm Justine Manzano. I'm available at justinemanzano.com and through WriteHive. I'm always hanging out on the Discord and also have a bit of a Discord problem. And you can find me as Geektastic Justine on Discord or on Instagram as Justine_Manzano. Thank you for joining us, all of our lovely panelists today. Thank you so much for the great conversation. Thank you for tuning in to How to Choose an Editor. This panel is going to move now into Q&A in the Discord server. So please tell us your thoughts, send any questions through, and our team will be happy to answer here. And please enjoy the rest of the Right Hive conference. See you on the Hive. Thank you.